Hi, I'm Meshal Malik, and you're watching Indus Special. An Indian activist, Shaila Rashid, has been booked by the Delhi police for sedition charges. According to the Indian authorities, Rashid's crime is that she has been allegedly spreading fake news with her tweets about Kashmir. Rashid wrote a detailed thread talking about how armed forces were entering houses at night and taking boys and men for interrogation. It also mentioned torture tactics and other human rights violations. But according to the authorities, this is misinformation. With Kashmir under lockdown for more than 30 days now, any information reported regarding Kashmir is vital. But with Rashid's case, more questions are to be asked of whether the forceful silence imposed on Kashmir is also insidiously extending to freedom of expression within India. Joining us for this discussion today is Ravale Mohydin, analyst joining us from Istanbul, and barrister Abdul Majeed Tramboo, permanent representative to United Nations for International Human Rights Association of American Minorities, joining us from Geneva. Thank you both for joining us and welcome to the show. Ravale, I'd like to begin with you. Now, Shaila Rashid's case is premised on the fact that everything she said is misinformation and there is a correct narrative to what is happening. But the fact that it's so difficult to access the on-ground situation in Kashmir, how can the correct narrative be found? How can it be uncovered at this point in time?
See, Meshal, what's happening over here is that the Indian government is controlling the entire narrative about the Kashmir dispute at this point and whatever is happening in Indian-occupied Kashmir. What's the three main points here? Is A, they're blocking access to information on the ground by doing various things like blocking landlines, blocking access to government funding for local dailies, blocking journalists from actually living in Kashmir, actually asking them to vacate. Then there is the concept of fake news. If anything does get out from this media blackout, it's considered fake news. And if it's anti-government, it would be considered completely fake news. But the point is that even if it is considered fake news, recent history shows that even if there is proof or evidence on the ground of whatever's happening is actually happening, such as, for example, as Shaila Rashid is saying, torture is actually taking place, even if that proof is provided, I am not sure that will be actually used correctly or be useful. We have the recent case of Major Gogoi in 2017, who was caught red-handed on camera for actually using a Kashmiri youth as a human shield by strapping him on the front of a jeep. So even when that evidence was provided, it was used to discredit Kashmiri resistance. It was actually used by the Indian media to actually make the case stronger for the Indian armed forces. So I don't know whether fake news, terming it fake news, is actually relevant here, because providing proof, as shown in recent history, has not borne any fruit.
Right. Barrister, to that point that Ravale has said that at this point in time, it seems like there's only one right narrative, one that aligns with what the state wants to say. Anything against that goes with the state's narrative would be charged with sedition. It would be seen as inciting violence, as we are seeing with the case of Shaila Rashid. Now, in a modern democracy, in any democracy, freedom of expression is a constitutional right, one that has to be protected. But when the state itself is failing to do that, it is going against that right. What other protections exist for the individual?
Well, to be quite honest, when you have a Hindutva fascist regime in power, the question really is whether there is a democracy. That is the big question. And secondly, when the right news is planned as a fake news or propagated as a fake news, that itself shows that the government of the day, which is a fascist government, is not really interested to straighten the situation in the Indian occupied Kashmir. That gives us a lot of material to show that India is really on its bent to see that Kashmir is destroyed once forever. This is why we are here at the United Nations during the 42nd session of the Human Rights Council. We want to raise these points here, particularly the total blockade of people of Kashmir. Today is the 37th day of the blockade. And it's not only the question of freedom of expression, what happens to the Indian journalists or any journalist. It's the question of the people's lives on the ground. And we have scarcity of food, and healthcare is in total shambles there. Now, we want to ask the Human Rights Council what they are going to do about it. My understanding is that the Foreign Minister of Pakistan is here tomorrow. He is going to address the Human Rights Council, and we want to ask him as well what Pakistan is taking the steps to ensure the world community, which is here all in one go, are going to do about it. Therefore, the freedom of expression is one part of it, but as a wholesome, it is Kashmir is in a terrible state.
Right. And Barrister Tramboo, as you mentioned, the 37th day, and up till now, it seems like while there has been rhetoric, there might have even been some condemnation of what has been happening. There have been no solid steps taken by the international community to actually intervene in this situation and actually try to relieve the Kashmiris of their plight. What do you see happening right now? Do you think the situation will change in the near future?
It depends really quite a lot what this Human Rights Council is going to do in next few days. And that's why we are here. And that's what we want to see. Human Rights Commissioner, High Commissioner yesterday again issued a statement which is very scathing of India. We had a meeting with the High Commissioner for Human Rights last week on 5th September, raised these issues, and she assured us that she is in contact with Government of India. She has been in contact with the Ambassador of India, and she has been raising her concerns, and that the Ambassador of India has been put on notice by the OHCHR that there would be steps that the United Nations, or for that matter, the Human Rights Council would undertake to see that the situation is rectified there. Therefore, a lot depends on what is going to happen next few days. This morning's speech, again, by the High Commissioner for Human Rights was related on Kashmir, expressing concern on Kashmir. And we want to see now how the members of the Human Rights Council are likely to react, and what Foreign Minister of Pakistan, who is, as I said earlier, who is going to be here tomorrow, is going to articulate his position on Kashmir and how he's going to carry the international community with him.
Right. Ravale, back to you, and talking about the point that Barrister Tramboo earlier mentioned, that the real question is India a democratic state any longer? The government of India would state that it is democratically elected. They went through a democratic process, the entirety of it. Now, but what is happening in Kashmir is a stark contrast to that reality that was presented to us earlier. Now, with the international community, how do you think they're approaching this? How do you think their perception of whatever is unfolding in Kashmir is? Do you think they are still engaging with India as a state that is upholding democratic values, or are they treating them as a belligerent state at this point?
Meshal, at this point, I don't think we should be concerned that much with international community. What's happening with the Kashmiris is something that should be talked about. The Kashmiri youth that has been in the new generation of Kashmiri politicians and Kashmiri youth were actually starting to engage trying to engage with India, the democratic or the undemocratic India, and trying to make a life for themselves. When the BJP has come to power, and now recently with the whole blockade and revocation of rights, what's happened is that all the disillusionment and that alienation that they had with India, that was previously based on past issues, past conceptions of unfairness dealt to them. Now that has been brought to the present. Suddenly, the India that was supposed to be, just the bad India in the books or in the history or whatever their family members, suddenly that's actually become a reality in their life.
Right.
What that will do to the Kashmiri youth and the new generation of Kashmiri politicians such as Sheila Rashid, that will just make them more and more angry, more and more feeling like victims of and feeling disenfranchised.
Right.
Now, what the international community needs to do at this point is to understand that and to protect the current generation of Kashmiris from not reacting to the disenfranchisement that is being carried on right now. The international community so far has not been at all, I believe, sure that there is a lot more an understanding of how the issue has become out of hand, how the issue, there is definitely an internationalization of the issue, thanks to Prime Minister Khan and the efforts of the Pakistani diplomatic society, communities across the world. But at this point, the international community definitely needs to do more, precisely for the reason that I mentioned. The new generation of Kashmiris is no longer thinking of India of the past. They're thinking of India as the present and how disenfranchised they feel.
Right. And Ravale, while I'm talking about the international community's reaction to India, the reason why I'm bringing up this point is because Kashmir has been silenced right now. We see the isolation of it. We see the alienation of it. They aren't given a choice to speak up because they have been completely isolated from the world. They don't have an option.
Yeah. Meshal, but that in itself is a point. The fact that they are not able to talk, that is a huge statement. I think that's a big blunder for the BJP government. The fact that they are silencing any kind of protest, they are actually creating so much smoke that people have started to wonder, where is the fire?
Right.
They are. Why are they creating such a blockade? That is what the international community has started to realize. What is it that is making them put more than 8 million people in their homes, not able to contact the outside world? What are they hiding?
Right. Ravale, hold on to that point because I want to carry it forward with Tramboo and ask him here. Now, it seems like the BJP government isn't showing any signs of relief to the Kashmiri people, but what are they planning to do? I mean, they can't expect that once the curfew is uplifted, there won't be a backlash. What do you think is going in the minds of the policymakers and the heads of states at this point in time when it's about Kashmir?
Well, for sure, Kashmir is talked at every power corridor around the globe. There is no doubt as to that. My understanding is that the president of India is coming to Switzerland this week. On 13th of this month. And we have a statement from the Foreign Ministry of Switzerland clearly saying that Kashmir is on the agenda and it will be discussed with the President of India. Therefore, Kashmir is wherever it should be raised, it is being raised at every stage. And there is a situation whereby everybody is concerned with regard to the current situation over there.
Right, but Tramboo, sorry to interrupt here, but with all of this, it's also a point to be made that Kashmir is the long-standing agenda, longest-standing dispute on the UN's list. it's been over 70 years and this dispute hasn't been given its due attention. Why? And it has taken this long and it's taken this crisis for the international community to show a semblance of concern. Now, isn't there a realization that the onus of what is happening right now not just resides on India, but also on the international players who took a backseat on this humanitarian crisis for so long?
You may be absolutely right there to a certain extent. But Kashmir off and on has been on the high agenda of the stakeholders, I would put it. It's not that Kashmir has been all silent for the last 70 years. At one given point, it came very near to some understanding between India, Pakistan, and the Kashmiri leadership. But obviously, the other world events have overtaken it from time to time. May it be Afghanistan, may it be Syria, may it be Libya, and so on and so forth. Some major catastrophes have happened in the world, which has overtaken it. But the question here now is, Meshal, is this. Kashmir is in the present situation now. It has to be seen in two spectrums. One is short-term solution of the current crisis and the long-term solution of the 71 years old conflict. Right. That is how it is being approached at the moment by the international community, by the stakeholders, and that's what is being worked on. Right. How to end the current crisis in Jammu and Kashmir. This is what is very crucial at this stage, and this is what must be addressed at this stage. And to a certain extent, I am very much hopeful that a solution on the short-term problem would be there coming in if not in weeks, in few months' time. It will develop towards that. Two things are very crucial that's likely to happen, as I said. One is what happens here at the 42nd session of the Human Rights Council, and second is the follow-up of it in the General Assembly at New York at the end of this month.
Right. Ravale, going back to you, short-term solution, as Barrister Tramboo said, is reached, and everyone is hoping for it. At least there will be contact of the Kashmiri people with their families living abroad. There will be access to healthcare facilities. But could life ever go back to normal after what has been happened now? I mean, there was a complete betrayal. Don't you think that this was an impetus enough for a long-term solution to come about?
I don't think there is a short-term solution. You can't. Sure, you can put a band-aid on a major wound, but what that does is okay. So, for example, the landlines get connected again, mobile phones get connected again. They make their calls, and what are they going to do? Get their medicine and then stop sitting pretty? No, they're going to fight. They're going to come on the streets. They're going to protest. It's not going to be a short-term solution. What needs to happen if the Indian government is a repeal of the revocation of rights that they did. They need to apologize to Kashmiris for making them go through this. They need to sit down with the bilateral partner that they seem to tell everyone that they want to have a dialogue with, yet when Pakistan tries to give some headway into this, they completely resist any effort made by Pakistan to talk to them. So then try to make sure that this revocation of rights is put away with. They listen to the Kashmiris. They talk to Pakistan if they don't want to talk, get other people involved, other countries involved, and actually do this in a dignified manner through a plebiscite, which is what the UN has promised. Not Pakistan, not India, the Kashmiris themselves.
Right. Ravale, just a last comment from you, and then I'll take this question to Barrister Tramboo as well. We talked earlier about the Hindutva that has been spewing within India and the sentiments that are on rise, especially with the Modi government in power. We've also tried to contact Indian journalists, Indian activists, and they have explicitly stated that they fear for their lives to talk to the media regarding Kashmir, regarding India. Now, with all of this, and we're talking about bilateral talks, we're talking about engaging with a country they've seen as the enemy for so long, even though it continuously reaches out with a fig leaf. With all of this, what do you see next in terms of India's diplomatic ties with its neighbor?
I mean, to be honest, I think first, if they want to kind of make this better for not just for Pakistan, but for themselves, they, as I told you, they need to kind of start, first of all, try not to make, I was watching Indian television the other day, and out of the 10 news articles, 7 of them were about Pakistan. So first of all, they need to start, and all of them were negative. First of all, they need to stop using their media to spread hatred against Pakistan in the country. They need to start developing a narrative of reconciliation.
Right.
They need to start developing a narrative of engagement.
Ravale, sorry, that's a very important point. Just going to carry this forward to Barrister Tramboo before we wrap up this segment. Barrister Tramboo, how important is that, correcting the narrative they've had with Pakistan and trying to engage with them, trying to make sure that the hostilities decline, the escalations of tensions, those decline?
Well, that's very crucial, to be quite honest. That's what should happen. But I'm very sure of one thing. And that's what the short term I was talking about, until India maintains the status quo of Jammu and Kashmir to its original position prior to 5th August of this year, I do not think that Pakistan is in a position to talk to India.
Right. On that point, thank you so much, Ravale Mohydin, for joining us from Istanbul. Thank you, Barrister Abdul Majeed Tramboo, for joining us from Geneva. We're going to take a short break. When we return, we're going to be talking about what is happening in Gaza. Stay with us. Welcome back to Indus Special. This past Friday marked the 73rd week of the Great March of Return protests at the Gaza border. 2 Palestinian teenagers were shot dead by Israeli forces, and more than 70 protesters were left injured. Now, injuries and death toll records show that these protests have had a pattern of turning violent and bloody. And yet, week after week, thousands of protesters come out risking their lives. We take a closer look at why the Great March of Return matters and what is unfolding in Gaza. Joining us for this discussion today, Nuria Oswald, legal advisor at the Al-Mizan Center for Human Rights, joining us from Geneva. We're also joined by Mr. Jafar Ramini, Palestinian writer and political analyst, joining us from London. Thank you both for joining us and welcome to this show. Mr. Ramini, let me begin with you. Now, what do these protests signify? Now, this was the 73rd week. It's been a long time. Every week, each Friday, thousands of people come out, protest, show their solidarity for their cause, show their anger, show all their sentiments. What does it mean to come out on the border in this manner?
To the Palestinians who are living in Gaza in an open prison for the last 11 years, it means claiming their rights, their right of return to the cities, to the towns, to the villages that they were forcibly removed from in Palestine in 1947, 1948. Those 2 million people in Gaza did not come from thin air. They are there because Israel pushed them out. And Israel not only pushed them out, but they put them in a cage and put an iron fence around them to stop them from leaving this prison. And just to mention to your viewers, the right of return is not something that we, the Palestinians, have invented. It's enshrined in international law, in the United Nations Resolution 181, which allowed Israel to become a member of the United Nations. But if I may add, this whole thing about Gaza did not happen overnight. It's not haphazard. It's very well planned. It's meticulously planned and financed and organized. In 2004, a chap by the name of Arnon Sofna, who was the advisor to the then Prime Minister Sharon, advised him to create this ghetto in Gaza. And he said, when those 2 million people become like animals and come to the fence, we have to kill, and kill again, day in and day out. This is the policy of Israel. It's part of the ethnic cleansing and genocide in Palestine that's been going on for over 100 years.
Right. Mr. Ramini, hold on to that point, because you're talking about the violence that happens during these protests, and I want to take Ms. Oswald's thoughts on that as well. Ms. Oswald, now we talk about the violence, the cross-border firing, and trying to make sense out of what happens there. Now, it is the right of every citizen to protest peacefully. But what happens when they are met with gunfire? Why does that happen? And how much of a recurring pattern has this become at the Gaza border?
Well, as you said in the beginning, protesters have been coming out for now the 73rd week, which is almost a year and a half of protests. They're coming out in the thousands, despite how dangerous it is. And I want to tell you how dangerous it is based on our monitoring and documentation on the ground. We've so far documented the killing of 211 unarmed protesters, medics, and journalists, 46 of whom are children, 2 who were killed, as you mentioned, on Friday. And so it is extremely dangerous. Now, they're being targeted counter to international human rights law, which is the applicable framework to the protests. And it's illegal because these protesters, journalists and medics, do not pose an imminent threat, which is the bar for the use of force under the law enforcement framework under international law. People are still coming out because of the catastrophic living conditions in Gaza, as we just heard, now in their 12th year, but of course following decades of restrictions under occupation, and they're being prevented from leaving. And at the same time, protesters are demanding recognition of the right to return for refugees to return to their homes that they were expelled from in 1947, 1948. Right. So on the one hand, you see a very serious loss of hope stemming from the lack of future that Palestinians in Gaza have because of the illegal closure and blockade framework. But at the same time, you see Palestinians asserting their hope as they come out in the thousands every Friday, practicing their freedom of expression, their freedom of speech, which are fundamental rights under international law, despite how dangerous it is.
Right. Mr. Ramini, coming back to you and a little more about the violence and what is happening. Now, a lot of the vocabulary used in media reports is obscure when talking about the violence that occurs during these protests. I mean, there's always words like crossfire and that something happened. It's never really explicitly stated that these were unarmed protesters and they were fired at. Now, with all of this that is happening, what is the other side presenting as their version of what is happening? Why do these firings happen at unarmed protesters? What do the Israeli forces say in regard to this?
Well, of course, as ever, the Israelis will play the victim, and the international media will adhere to their instructions that we are the victim in this. I have seen many videos that's been doctored by international organizations like Christian Friends of Israel in America. That was all lies and fabricated. Let me just give you 2 quotes from official Israeli sources. A gentleman by the name of Avi Dekta, who is a Knesset member, i.e. member of government in Israel, said, and I quote, The Israeli army has enough bullets for everyone. If every man, woman, and a child in Gaza gathers at the gate, in other words, there is a bullet for every one of them. They can all be killed, no problem. This is a member of the government of Israel. This is not propaganda. This is what they say. Now, Lieberman, who was the Minister of Defense, said, and I quote again, "I will not support any peace initiative that will allow the return of one Palestinian refugee, not one. There are no innocents in Gaza. They are all combatants, i.e. the Israeli Defense Force and the Israeli government consider every man, woman, and child in Gaza as a soldier, and they are not innocent, and they killed him." Now, there was one quote from the Israeli Defense Force that they tweeted on the day, and I'm going to read it for you. "Nothing was carried out uncontrolled. Everything was accurate and measured, and we know where every bullet landed." These are the people who are telling the world that they are defending themselves and they are the victim in this. What are the Palestinians in Gaza to do? They are besieged from air, from land, from sea. Israel has polluted the water aquifers in Gaza.
Right.
Israel doesn't allow people of Gaza who have serious illnesses to go out for medical treatment.
Right.
They don't
Mr.
allow
Ramini,
food.
now we're talking about propaganda here, talking about statements being thrown. And this is a question I want to take back to Ms. Oswald and talk to her about this. In situations such as this, in conflict areas, it's very difficult to take out facts and figures that are verifiable, that can be trusted. Now, your organization, the facts and figures that you quoted, how do you guys ensure that the numbers that are coming out are verified and that are accurate, and how can they be trusted?
Well, El-Mizan was founded 20 years ago. We've been working in Gaza documenting human rights violations by all actors for those 2 decades. And our field workers are very well trained, of course, to international standards on evidence gathering. And I think what's important to remember here is that El-Mizan's information is accepted as evidence within Israeli courts of law.
Right. Right. On that point, that accepted within Israeli courts of law, that's an important point that you've made there. And thank you, Nuria Oswald, for joining us and talking to us. Mr. Jafar Ramini, now, what do you see happening with the tensions rising after the Friday protests? What do you see unfolding next for the tensions within Palestine and Israel for Gaza?
There is no end in sight. The Israelis, many Israeli leaders said, "I wish the sea will swallow Gaza." They are not bashful about their thoughts. And I just to say, because I've just got you news from Gaza this morning when you asked me to come in the show. And the lady who's with me, Nuria, works for the same organization that I spoke to this morning in Gaza. And these are the latest figures since Friday. 324 people killed, 46 were children, and 18,000 injuries, 4,483 of which are children. These are figures that can be verified. And I would please ask you to be careful with the use of language. There is no crossfire. These people, men, women, and children, go out carrying nothing but a flag, and they are shot at from 300-400 meters away by snipers who are barricaded at the fence. They call it a border. It is not a border. Israel has never, ever declared its international borders. It's a security fence on stolen Palestinian land.
We're also joined by Ms. Youmna El-Sayed, who's a journalist joining us from Gaza. Thank you, Ms. El-Sayed, for joining us and talking to us. Now, the figures that Mr. Ramini just stated, 324 people killed so far, 46 of whom were children, is a devastating number. And we're talking about the protests that are held each and every Friday. These people come out protesting for their rights. Give us a sense of the atmosphere there. What happened this Friday specifically when those two teenagers were shot?
Meshal, thank you for having me in your show. What happened this last Friday and what happens in every Friday, the same killing continues to happen. This last Friday, two teenagers, 14 and 17, were killed. They were shot by sniper bullets. They were about 600 meters away from a fence. When we talk about the fence, we're talking about actually 3 fences. There are 2 barbed wire fences, and in between them, there are concrete walls. These 3 fences separate the protesters from the Israeli soldiers on the other side of the border. So we're talking about a very far away distance between the soldiers and the protesters, in addition to no threatening at all that is being no threat at all towards these soldiers. These protesters that come every Friday to protest come because they want to send a message to the world. They want the world to hear them. They have been under suffocating siege for more than 13 years now. This siege has caused a great and high rates of unemployment, poverty, very difficult economic conditions in the Gaza Strip. These people are protesting now because this is their only hope. This is the only way they have in showing the world and giving their message to the world, or trying to tell the world that we are here, we shouldn't be unforgotten. We are under occupation. The Israeli-Palestinian occupation is one of the cheapest occupations ever, because the Israeli government does not pay anything for this occupation. Right. On the other hand, they take all the resources from the Palestinian lands that they are occupying. They take money from the
and Ms.
Palestinian...
El-Sayed, sorry to interrupt you here, but talking about how the state within Gaza is, I do want you to expand on that a little. The World Bank even stated figures that the unemployment rate is the highest in the world in this area, over 50%. How is that for the youth, for the population at large? The economy is completely tanking. It's saying that in a year or so, Gaza might be uninhabitable to live in completely. What is the state like? What is everyday life like in Gaza?
First of all, the unemployment has reached over 70% now. 80% of all the factories in the Gaza Strip are not working and they are shut down. We're talking about more than 50% destroyed infrastructure. This year, less than 15% of the students were able to register in colleges and universities because of the lack of financial income. So they can't pay for their universities in order to enter any university. We're talking about extremely difficult economic conditions that the Strip is going through now. There is no process of purchase and selling and buying in the Strip anymore. People are really and literally dying of poverty, extreme poverty. Now, this is all the results of a 13-year suffocating siege on the Gaza Strip. There are no imports, there are no exports, there are no industries working for employment for employees to work in. Things are going from bad to worse in every period of time that is coming, and the world is just watching. Right. All we get is condemnation from the UN, from the international community. We get resolutions, none of the resolutions, none of the condemnations, the reports that are being done, there is nothing that is implemented. So all we get
Right.
are just
Right, and the fact that all these resolutions are being passed and nothing is being done. Mr. Ramini, the economy is tanking here. It's becoming a place that is going to be unlivable. I mean, unemployment, as Ms. El-Sayed stated, has reached almost 70%. And it seems like the world is completely apathetic to the plight of what is happening in Gaza. What pressure needs to be put on the international community, and is there any leverage that can be placed on them for there to be anything that can happen in Gaza to relieve the people of their situation?
Nothing will be done to pressurize Israel to do anything that is right or legal unless the United States of America applies this pressure. Let's not forget that America gives them $3.8 billion a year, and they give them weapons, and most importantly, they give them political and diplomatic cover. So every resolution that the young lady from Gaza was just talking about will have the American veto waiting around the corner. And now, with Mr. Trump at the helm, a narcissist, a man who knows nothing about international politics, who runs his administration via Twitter, Israel is having a Christmas every day. Whatever they demand of America, Mr. Trump will deliver. First, he delivered Jerusalem as the eternal capital of Israel. Then he delivered the Golan Heights. And now he is contemplating giving yet another gift to Netanyahu before the elections in a week, that he can annex the West Bank, or at least the settlements in the West Bank, to Israel. We, the Palestinians, are helpless and defenseless. What we have is the young generations, like the young lady from Gaza, who are standing fast and will not allow the Zionist project in Palestine to reach a successful conclusion. All the Arab countries and the PA and Hamas are letting down these young Palestinians who are suffering of no fault of their own other than being Palestinians and born in a land that the Zionists are lusting over.
Mr. Ramini, since running short on time, I want to get quick last comments from Ms. El-Sayed. Ms. El-Sayed, with all the conditions that are prevalent within Palestine and in Gaza specifically, now what are the sentiments of the youth, the younger population? We are seeing a huge amount of turnout at these protests. But what more do they wish to do? What more are their plans? And just tell us about their on-ground feelings of everything that is unfolding.
Now, despite all the killing and the enormous amounts of injuries, I mean, if you walk in the streets of the Gaza Strip now, unfortunately, half of the population, and I mean it when I say half of the population, are crippled. Half of them have lost their legs. And yet people still go to these protests weekly because they feel that this is their only chance. All through the 13 years now, they have done nothing. No one has looked down at them. There are no solutions for the Gaza Strip. So they think that and they believe that this is their only solution, to go there every week, no matter how many people are being killed or injured, and to send their message to the world and say that we are here, we need this blockade to be lifted. The youth here in Gaza tell you, we have lost enough and we will not stop now. They are not going to stop unless this siege is lifted from the Gaza Strip. This siege means that they are dying. People are dying, so they don't have a problem to go to the borders and get killed anyway, because even if they're not at the borders, they're dying in their homes because of lack of unemployment, because of lack of the basic needs of life that are in the strip. So they would go there. This is their only way of fighting this oppression
Right.
Okay, no matter
And
how
Ms.
much.
El-Sayed, on that note, thank you so much, Ms. Youmna El-Sayed, for joining us, and Mr. Jafar Ramini for joining us. Thank you for watching Indus Special. We will see you again tomorrow with more stories. Till then, goodbye.